There's a certain kind of person who can disappear for an afternoon and feel calm, and also set up a new app in 30 seconds without asking for help. If that sounds like you, it might not be a personality quirk at all. It might be timing. If you were born roughly between 1976 and 1985, you sit in a narrow gap that researchers and sociologists have struggled to label cleanly. You're close enough to Gen X to remember the old rules, and close enough to Millennials to live comfortably in the new ones. Some people call this group Xennials or Xennials, a microgeneration shaped by a very specific collision of technology, culture, and economics. And that collision left psychological fingerprints. Today on The Quiet Mindset, we're going to unpack what those fingerprints look like, why they matter, and how to use them to your advantage instead of feeling stuck between worlds. Let's start with the simplest difference. Your early life trained you for a world that moves slower. Boredom wasn't a problem to solve. It was a place you sat, a quiet room, a long car ride, a line at a store with nothing to scroll. You learned how to tolerate nothing happening, and that's a real skill. You also learned social life with higher commitment. Plans weren't fluid. You couldn't instantly update someone. If you said, "Meet me at 7," you meant it, because the backup plan was uncertainty. You showed up and hoped your people showed up too. That required a kind of trust that's rarer now. Then, at the exact moment you were building identity and independence, the world rewired itself. Not slowly, not politely, fast. Suddenly, communication became constant, information became infinite, and being unreachable turned from normal into suspicious. Most generations learn one dominant technology environment while their sense of self is still forming, but you learn two. And learning two worlds during your formative years changes how you think, how you relate, and how you regulate your attention. Here's why. Your brain's prefrontal cortex, the part involved in planning, impulse control, and adapting to complexity, keeps developing well into your 20s. That means many people in this microgeneration were still in a high flexibility window when digital life exploded into daily reality. So you were young enough to absorb new tools quickly, but old enough to remember what existed before the tools. That dual memory creates a kind of psychological bilingualism. You can talk face-to-face without feeling bored after 6 seconds, and you can also learn new interfaces without feeling threatened. You're not impressed by technology, but you're not intimidated by it either. That middle stance sounds small, but it affects everything. It affects your relationship with privacy. If you grew up before everything was recorded, so you experienced a version of life where mistakes evaporated, an awkward haircut, an embarrassing crush, a terrible party decision, a dramatic argument. Most of it lived and then dissolved into time. It survived only as a story, and stories soften at the edges. That matters because human memory is not a video file. It's a living thing. Your mind edits. It emphasizes. It compresses. It turns events into meaning. And when a life is permanently documented, that natural process gets disrupted. Instead of remembering who you became, you get haunted by who you were, preserved in high resolution. People who grew up with less documentation often have a different sense of psychological breathing room, not because life was easier, but because the past was allowed to fade. So if you sometimes feel uneasy about oversharing, it's not just being private. It's that your nervous system was trained in a world where the default setting was not being watched. Now let's talk about the second collision that shaped this group: money. A lot of people in this microgeneration stepped into adulthood around the time of the 2008 financial crisis or felt its aftershocks early in their careers. That timing is brutal, because early adulthood is when your brain tries to build a model of the world. Is the world stable? Do hard work and loyalty pay off? Is planning worth it? An economic instability during that stage can teach a lesson that doesn't go away easily, even when your income improves. It can create a quiet background thought. What if it all collapses again? And that thought affects risk, relationships, career moves, and even rest. Some people call it caution. Some call it anxiety. Often it's adaptation. If you learned that stability can vanish overnight, you don't just chase dreams. You check exits. So now imagine what it's like to combine these two forces. On one side, you learn to adapt to massive technological change. On the other side, you were taught to distrust stability. That creates a very specific mindset. You're capable. You're flexible. You can reinvent yourself. But you may also struggle to fully relax into any single identity, job, or lifestyle, because you've lived through enough change to know how temporary things can be. And this is where a lot of people feel out of place. Too old to relate to people who never knew a world without constant connectivity. Too young to relate to people who never had to rebuild their skills midlife because the tools changed. Caught between two sets of rules. Here's the paradox that defines this microgeneration. You often hold contradictions without it feeling unnatural, independent but cooperative, skeptical but still hopeful, comfortable online but craving offline presence. You can appreciate convenience without worshiping it. You can see what was gained, and you can also name what was lost. And what was lost is worth saying out loud. We lost patience. Not because we became worse people, but because the environment stopped training patience. We lost quiet, not because silence disappeared, but because silence became optional, and the brain tends to avoid what it doesn't practice. We lost deep presence, because attention became a marketplace, and everything is bidding for it. But we gained something too: access, connection, information, opportunity. The ability to learn almost anything without permission. And if you're in this microgeneration, you're one of the few groups that can compare both worlds from lived experience, not from theory. Now, I want to make this video more useful than just a description. And so here are 3 practical advantages this in-between experience can give you, and how to actually use them. First advantage, you can build attention range again. A lot of people can't because they never developed it in the first place. You did. You've been bored before and survived. So here's a simple exercise. Once a day, take 10 minutes with no input. No music, no scrolling, no multitasking. Just sit, stand, or walk slowly. At first, your mind will itch. That's normal. You know what you're doing is not relaxing. You're retraining tolerance for quiet. And that tolerance is the foundation of clarity. Second advantage, you understand trust in a deeper way because you lived in a world where relationships were maintained with fewer signals. You didn't have constant proof of connection. You had to assume goodwill more often. So if modern communication feels exhausting, don't blame yourself. Instead, to create low-noise closeness. Pick 1 or 2 people and establish a simple rule. You don't need instant replies. You do need consistency, a weekly call, a monthly dinner, a predictable rhythm. This protects relationships from the chaos of constant messaging. Third advantage, you can translate between generations. This is a real skill in workplaces, families, and friendships. You can explain to older people why digital tools are useful without sounding like you're mocking them. And you can explain to younger people why boundaries matter without sounding like you're moralizing. If you want a concrete way to use this, try this sentence structure. I get why you like this. Here's what it gives you. Then, here's what it costs and how to reduce that cost. That approach lowers defensiveness on both sides. Now let's name the shadow side too, because quiet mindset content is not here to flatter you. The shadow side is this. When you're good at adapting, you can end up adapting forever. You can keep reshaping yourself to fit the moment, the job, the trend, the platform, the crisis. And one day you realize you've become extremely functional, but not fully present. So here's a grounding question, not a motivational one, a clarifying one. What do I want to stay the same about me even if the world keeps changing? Write down 3 traits you refuse to trade away. Maybe it's honesty. Maybe it's calm. Maybe it's creativity. Or maybe it's loyalty. Maybe it's health. Those traits become your anchor. Technology will keep evolving, economies will keep wobbling, culture will keep shifting. But you don't have to be rewritten every time reality updates. That's the deeper lesson of the in-between generation. Not that you're superior, not that you're broken, but that you've already lived through one major transition, or learned something many people are still learning. How to adapt without losing yourself in the process. And if you felt like you don't quite fit anywhere, I want you to hear this clearly, that not fitting isn't a failure. It's a signal that you have range. You can understand multiple worlds. You can choose intentionally. And you can build a life that uses the best of both. This is the quiet mindset. So I'll leave you with a quiet practice. Today, pick one moment to be unreachable on purpose, not as rebellion, as repair, even 15 minutes. Let your nervous system remember what it feels like to exist without being available. If this video put words to something you felt for a long time, subscribe to The Quiet Mindset. I'm building a library for people who think deeply, live in the real world, and want clarity without noise. And if you want to support the channel, you can become a member. It helps me keep making content with depth and calm. Either way, I've got another video waiting for you, and I think it will land. I'll see you next time.